if the commitments that exist today, if they are not met, we are at a trajectory where we increase global temperature by over 3 degrees. If all the commitments that are made today from all countries across the world, all the finance that is committed, we will manage to bring it down to around 2.6 degrees of temperature increase. However, to stabilize climate change, the requirement is to keep this global temperature increase under 2 degrees, and for that, that is the green remap case. That is what we need to achieve. So there is a big gap, and we can say essentially, in order to meet the Paris Agreement, global emissions have to come down by 3.5% every year. Just representing this in another way. So what's happening right now is the yellow line at the top of the graph, and where we need to be is under the arrow is that green line over there, where we come down from 33 gigatons of CO2 to 9.8 gigatons of CO2, and this requires, you can say, about 36% of electrification of heat and of transportation through renewable energy, and 39%. So renewables, you can say, are covering around 75% of the overall emission reductions that are needed. Again, as I mentioned, in solar, and out of the 75% of renewables, solar and wind will account to about 86% of the renewable energy generation. So you can say a large share of renewables is going to come from solar and wind technology, and the overall gross generation would double, between 2016 and 2050 globally. Right. So you can say the actions that are needed now. I think on particularly to accelerate the renewable energy capacity addition, there is a need to identify and map new renewable energy resources and develop a new portfolio of financeable projects. I think certainly this is another area where through the cooperation of the World Bank and many other agencies, including IRENA, are working on energy source mapping. So this is some place which this is an area. This analysis talks about not constructing new coal power plants, and I would say that that particularly refers more to, you can say, certainly more developed markets. I wouldn't want to comment on that here, but this is purely the findings of the model that came out. And then the plan for the power sector to accommodate increasing, you can say, renewable energy share. Now that's a fairly big challenge in itself. That how does the power sector incorporate the variability of renewables? So that's going to be a major challenge, and that includes deployment of mini grids. That includes prioritizing the flexibility of the power, and incorporating electric. So we expect electric vehicle technologies, communication technologies, a lot of that to improve. Storage would be a big, you can say, factor going forward in unlocking the potential of renewables in power generation. So that is something that the planners and the you can say at country level and all need to think about. And distributed energy would be a major, you can say, factor in achieving or what is required right now. Yes, so we had earlier talked about the power sector. Now moving into the end use or the building sector. This is the second biggest consumer of power, and over here the requirement in order to meet our commitments is even higher. Around 81% of energy in the building sector has to come through renewables. This includes, solar, geothermal heat pumps. It includes thermal technologies for heating and cooling, and as well as modern biomass. So, all of these are relevant within this sector, and it's expected that most of and going forward, you can say electric use or electricity for heating and cooling would be the main thing, and if the source of that energy is renewables, that would be the main contributing factor. But in addition to that, direct heat through renewables would also be, including geothermal heat and solar thermal, that would be a major part of this going forward. And this is also where the energy efficiency and renewable energy goes hand in hand, because in order to achieve all of this, a lot of, you can say, the energy consumption through better building designs through more, you can say, energy efficient use of more energy efficient technologies is essential. And again, distributed generation is going to be a major aspect of this, and therefore a scale up for uptake of renewables in the building sector. I mean, Pakistan is a good example in this. We've already moved forward thanks to the distributed generation and net metering provisions that are here. Similar initiatives are required in many countries globally. Now, this is perhaps the hard sector. This is the part which is perhaps the most difficult to decarbonize, and that is the transport sector. On road transportation, with the increase in electric vehicles, and with countries like the UK announcing already that going forward they will only allow, or they will have, only allow new electric vehicles on the road. So we're already seeing a movement there. However, in shipping, in air transportation, and railways and all this, it's still a difficult sector to fully decarbonize. And however, again, through the increase of renewables in the power sector, it's you can say electricity would account for 37% of the energy consumed in the transport sector, going forward. And but this still has a large share, as you can say, 44% through non-renewables, and about 20% of liquid biofuels and biogas is envisaged in this sector. Again, as mentioned, I mean, the need is to make the transport sector more efficient, a reduction in energy, and overall, you can say, management of transport. I think we're already seeing a lot of this happen through a lot of, even through Uber and all that. There are efficiencies that are being done in the transport sector. There are a lot of carpooling services that are offered now internationally that also reduce the number of vehicles on the road. And then at the same time, move towards more electric vehicles. I think that's going to be the main move going forward. Another, you can say, relatively difficult, the electrification part in the industry sector is, as again, it's something that's happening. There was a mention of captive power as well, and now increasingly we're also seeing renewable and storage-based captive units, generation units being deployed in industry. I think, in commercial and industrial applications of renewables are increasing. However, the biofuel uptake is going to be the major challenge. So again, in the 2050 scenario, about 62% of the energy that is consumed in the industrial sector has to come from renewables, and which basically means that the share of renewables in the industrial sector needs to grow by more than, by around 500% if we compare it to what is there today. And electrification would be about 1/3 of this, and the use of modern biomass technologies, industrial waste, either through gasifiers or through other, modern biomass technologies, that would be around 20% of how the energy in the industrial sector needs to be met going forward. Again, it's, as I mentioned, renewables and energy efficiency is a hand-in-glove situation going forward. As renewable energy technologies are more capex intensive, it's very, very from a purely economic point or financial point of view, it is very it is essential that the demand is first, the consumption, the energy consumption is reduced, and then renewable energy solutions are deployed. And I think some of the innovative ways of how this is also going to move forward. This is to ensure more corporate sourcing of renewables. We see a lot of big corporations, moving towards going into that 100 renewable target, which is that they will switch their entire power requirement to renewables. IKEA and many other international brands have already taken this pledge. So either through installing on-site or through financing renewable energy projects in other places, which is through corporate sourcing, they will ensure that at the moment there are 100 large companies globally that have taken this 100 renewables target, which is to achieve 100% of their energy demand through renewables. So just to see how this the change between if we stick to what has been pledged today and what needs to be done, how the projections for all the, as I mentioned, all the commitments that exist today, how they move to 2050, and what has to be done for remap. So in the current scenario, if we maintain the present trajectory, 95 trillion US dollars of investment would be needed in the energy sector by 2015. In order to decarbonize it, this investment would increase by 15 trillion and it would end at 110 US trillion. However, and in this particular case, the renewable energy and energy efficiency would basically amount to about 80% of the cumulative energy sector investments. And even though this requires higher investments in total, the effect on the global GDP is positive in the case of the global energy transformation of achieving the decarbonization targets. Now, moving into some challenges for Pakistan in this regard. I'm not sure if how many of you are aware, but IRENA had carried out a renewables readiness assessment for Pakistan, which was launched in 2018. So this was one of the, you can say, country-level interventions from IRENA, where we had carried out an analysis of, certain, you can say, short to medium term initiatives that can be implemented in the country. And so that came with, so the renewables readiness assessment is a 4-phase, you could say, country-led process. We mainly coordinated with the Alternative Energy Development Board in that, and it was mainly a power sector focused assessment that was done for Pakistan. And you can say that the main recommendations to emerge from that included you can say that there needs to be a more, you can say, focus into a more coordinated implementation of the energy planning. There are a lot of integrated energy plans that are done. However, the implementation part needs to be strengthened. One of the recommendations was to set stronger renewable energy targets. Zoning and competitive procurement, which is mainly auctions or reverse bidding, was something that was promoted, was encouraged, and then also accelerating private sector investment in the transmission and distribution sector. Further focus on distributed generation and creating an enabling environment for the off-grid sector. So, these were, some of the recommendations, and we're really happy to see that, the upcoming renewable energy policy does set very ambitious renewable energy targets. I mean, I think it's in the final stages of approval, but, there is movement towards there. I believe also that, in the province, at the provincial level, there is move towards the auctions of, solar and wind technologies, and also I think more can be done on the private sector involvement in the transmission and distribution sectors. One area where perhaps more could be done is to really look into private sector involvement in off-grid and mini-grid sectors, and I think in another presentation that I'm scheduled to do tomorrow, I will be focusing more on that. So these were the recommendations that were made for Pakistan, and I think that, from the challenge perspective, I think for a growing population and economy, meeting the overall energy needs is, you can say, the major challenge for the country. The heavy reliance on fuel imports, this again is, results in a widening trade deficit. I mean, you all know this better than I do. And then also the air quality issues. I mean, we experience that in certain times of the year, particularly in the, you can say, areas around central Punjab. The air quality can be really severely affected, and so renewables offer solutions. I think it's a pathway of opportunity that renewable energy sector offers to Pakistan. It offers an increased avenue for foreign and private investment, and has the potential to become a real pipeline for investment coming into the power sector for both for the energy sector and the power off-grid as well as end-use applications. It certainly will contribute to poverty. Improved electrification will contribute heavily to poverty alleviation and job creation. And the renewable energy sector globally is one of the few sectors where that is actually increasing jobs. I mean, nowadays with automation and big data, a lot of the traditional sectors are seeing that there would be a reduction of jobs in those sectors. Renewables is actually one which is growing and which is offering high income opportunities for people. And at the moment, more than 11 million people are employed globally in renewables, and I think this is showing an upward trend as well. And then renewables will certainly offer will reduce the dependency on imported fuels, and will also help with the costs coming down on the competitiveness and market access for the industrial sector. And last but not least, it's important because it results in pollution abatement and climate change adaptation, and if deployed at the rural scale, it also results in a lot of improved social services and healthcare, education, water and sanitary health. If deployed at community level, that's also something that is an opportunity. So I'll conclude now with perhaps some of the areas of focus that can be of consideration for Pakistan is increasing the power demand through renewables. Again, on the grid-based side, we have a robust set of, we have done well, and that's a growing sector. But on the off-grid and the commercial and industrial side, more can be done certainly. Even on renewables as well, I think that there is scope to do more. Then, facilitating local content development, as I mentioned on the job side, a lot of the countries that have seen an uptake of renewables have also seen a lot of joint ventures with local companies. We saw that in the case of Descon here in Pakistan as well, I believe, which is providing some local content related to the wind turbines. So more of that is seen in countries which have seen more renewable energy development. There's a lot more of local content, from cabling, from to even more higher tech you can say, components as well. And then presently we have, a large, I think according to the latest assessment, we still have around 30% of the country that is unelectrified, or 30% of our population that is either very poorly electrified or unelectrified. I think that's an opportunity for the renewable energy sector as well through off-grid and mini-grid expansion. And then on the end-use side, in the agri-food sector, water, transport, renewables can certainly play a role as well. I say renewables in the transport sector because we recently, Pakistan announced the electric vehicle policy. And I think that's also a step in the right direction for the country. And we've got a large number of CNG stations and all that are out of business. And perhaps through combination of solar and all, you can have solar charging stations. And this, could be another area to look into as well. So thank you very much for your time. And so if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Assalamualaikum, thank you for the talk. My name is Daniel, I'm here from Rayon Energy. You mentioned about the Paris Agreement and how countries have set up certain targets to meet the 2-degree mark. Can you just highlight what Pakistan's target is in terms of emissions and where do we stand right now, and is it a serious concern if we exceed that mark?
Well, globally, if that 2% is exceeded, that certainly is a serious issue. I mean, we're already witnessing the issues of climate change, and that's, you can say, already a major negative. It has had a negative impact on global GDP, and allowing temperature rise to go beyond 2 degrees.
Specifically for Pakistan, what's the target being set up?
Pakistan, well, we have currently, again, I'm probably not the right person to mention that, but I think from the Ministry of Climate Change, the nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement that we have is to reduce our overall emissions by 20%. It's not a very ambitious target, but then Pakistan is not one of those countries that is already a huge polluter. However, and again, it's our target is subject to a lot of I would say that I think that it's a conditional kind of target. I would encourage you to have a look at the NDC that we have yourself. And I think it's currently under revision because it will be resubmitted at the UNFCCC meet this year with the revised parts. But the first NDC that we announced was talking about a 20% reduction in overall emissions of the country. And in terms of the challenges of climate change for Pakistan, it should be a very, very serious concern. We are, I believe, either the 5th or the 6th most vulnerable country to climate change globally. So, what we could be looking at are things like, severe droughts and, water crises, water availability issues, and, which would, greatly hamper our agricultural sector. We're looking at more potential, you can say instances of land erosion causing landsliding, and there are a lot of potential, you can say, issues that we foresee in Pakistan, as it's fairly high on the climate vulnerability index. If I'm not mistaken, it's either the 5th or the 6th most vulnerable country, and the main issue is water. I think that would be the biggest challenge. Thank you.
Ali, I would like to make a comment here. I think I'm afraid we don't have time for any more questions on this, but you can always catch Ali during the tea break. Ali, thank you very much for making it all the way from Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi is like my second home. I stayed there for 20 years. So first of all, this is not just an invitation for just one presentation. NEPRA is now trying to outreach all those entities in the world who matter, because we believe we have a very important role to play, so we need to keep our... You can take a seat. Yeah. So we need to spread our wings and try to make learning and stand shoulder to shoulder with all those who are making a difference in various parts of the world. So we are already in touch with some top business school in the world who are actually specializing in regulatory affairs. And hopefully in dates to come you will see our collaborations whereby we are trying to have an engagement to further capacity building of our personnel. For the idea is to become a potent regulator that we should be. So pass on my special thanks to your top management, and hopefully we'll keep inviting you guys, and maybe we'll be visiting you as well. And this is going to be a long haul relationship. Thank you very much. And one more thing, do you by chance have a copy of this readiness assessment report that you guys have generated? If you can leave a copy, I'll really appreciate it. Otherwise, I'll leave my card with you. You can email it to me later. Thank you. Great. Thank you very much.
All IDF publications are available for download as well, including the